Okay, so I've been seeing a lot of people ask for a Clawbringer build that isn't focused around Spore Warden, Wrath of Nature, and Spell Shot Buff Meister Cheese. So I made this a couple days ago. This is a Clawbringer Stabomancer build. There's about 23 points in my Clawbringer tree, and I think 21 points of Stabomancer. I'm going to be trying to, if I can remember, to explain enchantments, why I'm running what I'm running, how to use the build properly, how to improve on it, things to look for, and build variations. Okay, so getting right into it, we're going to be using Storm Dragon's Judgment. The reason for this is going to, for one, be our source of lightning damage. Two, this has a very low cooldown. And three, you can recall it immediately after casting it. So the way that we're going to be using it is we're going to throw it, hit an enemy, and then recall it. It has a 21-second cooldown at base, but because it refunds a portion of the cooldown whenever you recall it, the cooldown on it is about 7 seconds. And the only thing that I have that's affecting cooldown whatsoever is attunement, which, as you can see, it's only at 26. Moving forward, we're getting our fire damage from Oath of Fire. This is going to take 20% of the damage that your gun deals and give it to you as an additional bonus fire damage. Oath of Thunder, we put 4 points into. This is going to increase our bonus lightning damage by 20%. And then we're going to put 5 points into Dragon Aura. This is going to be a general blanketed all elemental damage increase. I have a mod that gives me an additional point in this. So I have 1 point in Rebuke, not for any particular reason other than I was trying things early on. But you can put this anywhere. If I was making this build now, I would put this into 1,000 cuts. But you're more than welcome to put it anywhere. You can put it here or wherever your heart desires. Um, One thing that I do want to note very briefly is that lightning ability damage is different from the lightning damage that you will find on your weapons, in the sense that lightning ability damage from this will not apply a status effect damage over time. Um, Moving forward, I went into Friend to the Flame. This increases my Wyvern Companion damage by 60%. I don't really care about the Wyvern Companion all that much because this isn't a companion build, but being that we went into this, we did pick up Firebolt and Storm Breath. Uh, these are on very long cooldowns, and I would love to see these be buffed in the sense of their cooldowns being dropped some. But outside of that, they do give you the passive effect of giving you 8% gun damage and 12% damage reduction, which is kind of a wash because 12% damage reduction is the same thing that you get from having Rebuke at level 5, and you will still get turreted on by pretty much anything in Chaos level 20. Moving forward, we
my first love.
cool. We went 3 points into Awe. For doing fire damage, we're going to get critical hit damage, and doing lightning damage, we'll get critical hit
What
chance.
shall I meet death out with next?
This is going to give the. Okay, that's throwing me off. 15% and 33% are the values on that for a duration of 12 seconds, but I wouldn't pay too much attention to the duration being 12 seconds. The reason for that is we're always doing fire damage because of Oath of the Fire, and the downtime on this, like we established earlier, is only going to be 7 seconds, so we have pretty much no excuse to not always have all up. Moving forward to Stabomancer, we have 5 points in Arsenal, and this is going to be melee, spell, and gun damage increased by 15%, and then we're going to put 3 points into Haste, which is melee attack speed and movement speed. 12% increases for both of them, and if we use a spell, it doubles it, so we'll have 24% for 12 seconds. I have 1 point in Potent Poisons, but this is coming from my mod, and I have 5 points in Swift Death, which ties into Haste. This is a percentage all damage dealt increase based off of how fast I'm moving. Exploit their weaknesses is the basis of this build. We're going to put 3 points into that. My mod gives me 3 additional points, bringing me to a damage increase of 12% damage, all damage dealt per effect, per status effect that I've applied. Whoa, I butchered that. We're going to put a point in elusive, which is going to make it to where I can shoot and sprint at the same time, which is going to help me keep Swift Death up. I then put 3 points into sneak attack to get 9% critical damage, but mainly so I could get to 1,000 cuts to put a single point in it. I know this point seems like it's pretty redundant because it's such a small value at 0.2% per stack, but it does stack up to 25%. I know that's not a huge percentile increase, but one thing that I want to point out is that all sneak attack, dirty fighting as a passive, and dexterity, they're all just general crit chance and crit damage increases. They do not specify gun damage or gun, melee, or spell critical hit chances. So these apply to all 3 of those things as well as dot damage, which means I have 4 sources of stacking this up. And being this is an all damage dealt skill, this also affects all 4 of those things, as well as Swift Death, as well as exploit their weaknesses. Um, so there's just a lot of inner synergy. Moving on to the items, we're using liquid cooling because it's the best weapon in the game. But mainly, even if they nerfed it, it would still be used because it synergizes so well with this build in particular. Because of Awe giving you the crit chance that it does, it seems to be working differently than what crit chance typically does. It almost seems like it's additive instead of multiplicative. If you're unfamiliar with what I mean by that, I mean that the 33% chance that it gives you seems like it's being added on to the base 5% base that you have on a gun. Whereas something like Dirty Fighting that gives you 30% increased critical chance, they're worded the same, but Dirty Fighting does not give you a flat 30% on top of the 5%, bringing you to a total of 35%. It's giving you 30% of 5%, so really it's only bringing you up to about 6 to 7%. This seems like it's adding on to the 5%, bringing you to 38%. I could be wrong, and it might just be a whole lot of damage numbers giving me criticals, but it definitely seems like I never have to worry about my liquid cooling even building up heat remotely. But the main thing is we do want this to be a frost weapon, and the liquid cooling just synergizes with it and also happens to be a really good gun. The reason we want it to be frost is because we're using a poison buffmeister. This one could be better. You can get one with 2 charges as well as better text on the bottom. I have bonk and zap, which ties into spells and melee. This melee portion isn't really benefiting me that much at all. But because this is poison, that means that our liquid cooling is doing frost, poison, and fire just from the skill tree. And that just by shooting something, we're applying 3 different status elements, which means we already have a 36% damage increase. Moving on from there, we're going to go to the mods. This is the mod that we're looking for. It has 3 points of exploit their weaknesses, and then 1 point of the poison skill and dragon aura. You can get a 2-3 variation of this, meaning that one of the other skills can have 2 points, and then exploit their weaknesses can have 3. As far as which one of those is better, having 2 points in poison or 2 points in dragon aura, I think dragon aura is probably a little bit better because it applies to all elemental types all the time, whereas poisons, even though I don't have a problem getting status applications, it only ties to if something has had a status applied to it. So being that there's any kind of remote chance, I'd rather just go for a constant damage increase than anything. It's probably worth pointing out to anybody who may not know, but this is always going to drop as a Stabomancer power focused mod because it's predominantly dealing with Stabomancer skills. So do not try to look for one of these that has Clawbringer power as 30% instead of Stabomancer. And if you get any passives that are different from mine, yours is probably better. As a legendary version of this mod that would be really ideal, the Corrupted Plate Mail, which is going to convert 30% of all your damage dealt, so that's spell damage, melee damage, gun damage, and your dot damage is going to be converted by 30% into an additional dark damage, would give you your 5th and final status application, putting you at a max benefit of exploit their weaknesses of 54%. So that would be really ideal, not to mention that dark magic would also give you lifesteal. From there, we did want a little bit of Clawbringer power, being that this can only drop a Stabomancer power. I have a Sacrificial Skeep, but that's not like you need this or anything. It's just what I had, and it happened to have what I wanted on it. I wanted frost damage because the liquid cooling is a frost-oriented weapon, and it's my primary weapon source. And Clawbringer power because I wanted Clawbringer power. The other 2 stats are pretty ideal. When it comes to the actual legendary effect of Sacrificial Skeep, I end up outrunning the Skeep a lot. But sometimes whenever if I happen to
How
go
shall I
down,
become deadlier next?
you can shoot the Skeep and revive yourself. As far as rings, gun damage, pistol crit damage, all damage dealt, anything that you were building for actively towards your skill tree or what we're currently going to be using is going to be best to have. So nothing really crazy here. As far as shields, I used a trick mirror on my playthrough. I was doing a melee playthrough on another character, and I found that the transistor shield with whatever I had rolled on it was pretty good. I don't really remember, but I'm going to assume it was the adaptive passive that I actually have on this trick mirror. But I kill myself a lot in in-game activities because of water. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but whenever you shoot water or cast a spell in water, it will leave an elemental pool in the water that will do friendly fire, so it will kill you very quickly, or self-damage, however you want to put that. It'll kill you extremely quickly, and the transistor shield benefits from taking elemental damage. It'll give you an additional 20% elemental damage from the damage type last taken. And it seemed to be like eating that pull damage very heavily to the point to where I'd never downed myself at all. So, yeah. Now, moving on to the build variations, I haven't talked about the melee weapon, and that's because depending on what melee weapon that you're using, you're either going to use this build or a different slight variation. So, for example, I know a lot of people recommend getting the Goblin Pickaxe, so by all means, go for this if that's what you have, and this you would have the build. But what I find to be better is if you have the Fate Breaker, it allows you to not have to run this action skill. The reason for that is the Fatebreaker legendary effect is melee attacks create 3 lightning projectiles that restore ward up to 100% the damage dealt. Now, what they don't say, or what they don't specify, is the fact that you don't actually have to hit anything with these melee attacks. You can just melee from a distance. And if I hit these targets, I will build up all as well as 1,000 cuts. So being that I have this, I would probably recommend swapping to Ghostblade, and that would be your build. I think it's also worth the mention that Buffmeister also gives you a 60% increase in movement speed as well as a fire rate. So that ties into your all damage dealt that you're benefiting from Swift Death. So yeah, that's the build. A different variation for if you wanted to stab a Mancer more focused build, you could go into From the Shadows, drop Friend to the Flame, and drop Awe, and then take those 6 points and put them into Sneak Attack and 1,000 cuts to get those both at max. And then as far as a mod, you'd be looking for a Smart Armor mod so that your critical damage gets increased by 50% while sacrificing 50% of your crit chance, because being in From the Shadows gives you 100% crit chance all the time. But yep, that's the build. I don't think I missed anything. As far as enchants, depending on what weapon you're using, if you're using this, then any enchant that's like action skill while in duration or action skill active, or increasing elemental damage, all damage dealt, pretty standard stuff you can use. And if you're not going to be using this and you're going to be using Storm Dragon's Judgment and the Pickaxe, for example, then I would stay away from action skill duration actives. I would go with action skill activations. Or I think I worded that right. Stay away from while action skill is active. Go to action skill activation enchantments. And make sure you're not double stacking them because they don't work that way. But yeah, that's about all I got. If you tried the build out and you like it, let me know.